to remind me of maybe some things, so
Yes.
so.
I'm living a beautiful life. I'm making a beautiful life. I'm changing, rearranging. I see a beautiful day. It's coming my way. It's a beautiful day. I'm living a beautiful life. I'm making a beautiful life. I'm changing, rearranging. I see a beautiful day. It's coming my way. It's a beautiful day.
Indeed, it is a beautiful day. And I tell you, I cannot wait for you all to hear from our special guest on tonight, Mr. Victor Williams. Welcome, Victor.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming in on such short notice. We actually were supposed to hear from Shonda Thorton, and so we just want to definitely send out prayers of wellness as she recovers. We love you, LaShonda. Get well soon. But just being the A-class person that she is, she immediately, in the midst of not feeling well, contacted you for you to come on in her stead. And so we just want to thank you for accepting the invitation.
She knows I like to talk a lot, especially about the topic of human trafficking. So I never turn down that opportunity to share what I think I know in this space with our community.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And so for you all who are going to have the esteemed pleasure of hearing from Victor Williams on tonight, I want to just share a little bit about him. He actually joined the U.S. Customs Service in 1991, later became the Department of Homeland Security. In February 2011, Victor was assigned to the DHS Special Agent in Change, Miami office's Human Trafficking Group. And in 2012, he was appointed as the coordinator for the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force until his retirement January 1st, 2018. So human trafficking, as many know, is the fastest growing criminal industry currently, with more than 50 million victims worldwide. And that is just astounding. And so we're going to get a chance to hear about what Victor is doing in this area. He also Victor believes that cultural awareness and education are key to preventing and combating human trafficking. And so this is truly, truly what we have to be aware of, the services that he's providing. So he's actually launched Quest to Freedom organization. This organization platform includes educating and empowering people through partnership with community organizations and human trafficking presentations and workshops. So he is definitely here to bring the awareness. And so I want to jump right into the questions, Victor. Your vita is quite impressive. But more so, what was the heart behind you coming into the arena of human trafficking and bringing awareness to it?
Well, I tell the story and I'll try to make it as short as possible because I know time is always a thing on shows. I was assigned to the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force here in Miami when I had the opportunity to go to Botswana, Africa as a coordinator. And during that experience is when I first got my human trafficking introduction. And when I heard the words modern day slavery, being an African American, I was like, what do you mean modern day slavery in America? we kind of touched on what it was. But even then, culturally, I wasn't thinking what I should have been thinking, and I'll get to that. I get back to the States, and my time is up with the FBI, and I come back to Homeland Security, and I have to pick a group to go into, and I ended up in the human trafficking group. Next to me was a gentleman, Jonathan Cruz. He's retired now, and he's given permission to use his name. He was an agent working a case of about 8 or 9 women trafficked from Mexico. And for months, these women were refusing to acknowledge that they were trafficked. And so these gentlemen were going to go to trial because these women are victims and witnesses. And what we found out was that one of the women in the group was part of the family that was trafficking the women and keeping them afraid. As soon as we pulled that woman out, we didn't even arrest her. We sent her back to Mexico, and all the women came forward. And so now these gentlemen switched their plans, and now they pled guilty, and now we're at sentencing. And this is what changed my life forever, is that one of the victims, or at this time, she gets up to give her statement, her impact statement to the judge to explain to the judge what this experience had done to her life, and that these men deserve the maximum of time. And she talked about from the moment they took her at the age of 14. She had been trafficked for 12 years. And I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to go down to Homestead and see the fields where these people are picking the vegetables that we eat. These men, it's a dirty job. These men didn't go home, change clothes, put on cologne to go to a trailer where she was serving 15 to 25 men a day sexually. These men came in there with their dirty clothes, and she talked about how horrible that experience and what she had to do to them. I don't know if you can even imagine what she went through. And she would lose it, and she would gain her power back and look at these men. This was the first time in her life that she can look at those men and say, what you did to me was wrong. And it just came over me. Just at that moment, I knew this was something that would be part of my life for the rest of my life.
Wow. And when you're talking about going from Homeland Security to the impact that you've made in this industry, when you retired, what was the heart behind you now having your own organization pertaining to what you were at one point employed to do?
So what happened? I mean, look, I did the last 8 years of my career. I worked human trafficking, and 6 of those years, I was the coordinator of the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force, as you mentioned. My job was to go out in this community, learn from the community, educate the community on what we thought we know from Homeland Security perspective, and build a partnership. That alone just gave me so much insight. And so when I retired in 2018, I bought the domain Quest of Freedom with a plan to do what I'm doing now. But you know what? Sometimes life have other travels for us to do. Things come in time. Timing is everything, right? And so when I first retired, I worked with an organization called Erase Child Trafficking, and we traveled around the country educating law enforcement in this space, which is needed today at all points, because human trafficking is about culture. Law enforcement being a dominant male world, I knew what mindset changing starts and how we get there. And it's about, culture, how to change culture. We got to start with mindset. And I give you an example, being a man world, a majority man world in law enforcement, I would often get, prostitution, the world's oldest profession. And my response to that would be, because we're the world's oldest customer, right? It doesn't exist, but we live in a culture that we demonize the person that's selling and who could be a potential victim, then demonize the people who are creating the market. And by the way, farming is the world's oldest profession. So I did that for about 6 months, and then I had the opportunity to do team security for the Atlanta Hawks. Looking from the outside in, I'm thinking, oh my God, working with, the basketball players traveling around. It was a great opportunity, great experience, but I realized it wasn't feeding my soul, you know? And I mean, I would go through that experience again because it really helped me get to where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
But when I chose not to come back for my third season, you know, life has a way of directing you where you're supposed to be going. When I left the Hawks, the state of Georgia just got their human trafficking grant, and I became the human trafficking coordinator for the state of Georgia for a year, which gave me a whole different perspective on dealing with this issue. And we may tap into a little bit of that as we go on. But yeah, so that was the journey. I did that for a year, but something was just like I wanted to come back home. I'm originally from Virginia, but I spent most of my adult life in Miami, and I just wanted to come back to Miami. So I quit my job. I kind of like sat around doing nothing. I had a couple of projects. One of the major projects that I did was the NBA security conference was held here in Miami before this season started. And I ended up doing a human trafficking presentation for them because a father took his 15-year-old daughter to, I'm not even going to call out the city or the team, but took his 15-year-old daughter to a basketball game. And I'll tell you, it was in Miami. And she went to the bathroom. And when she came, and the next time he saw his daughter was 11 days later when they were rescuing her out of Oklahoma being sold for sex. Okay. And people go, oh, they took her from the stadium. No, they didn't take her from the stadium. One of the biggest things that I do right now when I'm talking to parents is I tell parents, your biggest job, other than loving your kids unconditionally, is building a relationship with them that they can always trust and tell you the worst things going on in their life. We want them to clean their rooms. We want them to get good grades. We want them to be good people. But if your child goes missing, all of a sudden, none of that matters. And you're sitting there, you know, like, hey, God, please give me my child back. I promise I'll be a better parent. Well, you know what? Be a better parent right now. Because that's what it's all about, having that relationship. This young lady didn't have a great relationship with her parents. And she's a 15-year-old girl that's, you know, I don't know, you know, going through a lot of things, and somebody winked at her. And you know, she stepped out to go to the bathroom and they talked her into walking off. And the team didn't have anything to do with trafficking. Where they failed was they didn't have a good missing person policy. Because the young lady was in the arena for an hour before she left. And it's just a matter of educating. You know, we live in the space. I always say we live in the world that we think we know until we know, right? And so, you know, that's kind of like, so after doing that, November 15th was like a major change in my life. And days after that change, I'm like, hey, what am I doing? And that's when Quest for Freedom was reborn. And it's Quest, the number 2, freedom is all one word. And basically what we're about is educating people about the cultural awareness, educating, advocating for this cause, but mostly we've only been at this for a month or two. Our ultimate goal is to be able to provide immediate assistance for victims, because even working for the government, the federal government, and working for Georgia, whenever we came across victims, we didn't have the resources to give them that immediate need till they get to, you know, the service provider that was going to help them through it. So we had to reach out to different organizations, kind of like what I'm doing, Quest for Freedom, and say, hey, can you get this victim a couple nights in a hotel? Can you get them a plane ticket home? You know, whatever they needed right at that moment. Because that is the most important time when we come across victims, because it's not easy to get a victim to walk away from a situation. But when you do, you better be ready to take on those responsibilities to help them get to the life they really want. So that's what we're about.
And you know what? I'm so grateful that you made mention about the responsibility in totality, that it doesn't end with just taking them out of that situation, but we have to be prepared to love them back to some level of normalcy and some level of them being really deprogrammed from what has transpired in their lives. I want to talk a little bit because I thought that was a very interesting story that you shared in reference to the father taking his daughter to the game and actually having the devastation of seeing her 11 days later. But thank God she's back home. But I think about what could have transpired in that 11 days that's going to be much longer in her to be able to heal and process what took place in her life. Talk a little bit about the local and national statistics as it relates to human trafficking.
Listen, that young lady left for whatever reason. She didn't plan on being that happened to her. Matter of fact, when I heard about this, I tracked down the ESPN writer who wrote the story, who connected me to the family's attorney, who connected me to the guy that found this young lady. It wasn't the police that found her. It was a gentleman that surfed these sites like Skip the Games and some of these other sites that I don't care where you are in the world. If someone says we don't have that problem here, punch in Skip the Games, put in your city and look at the women that are being sold. They found this young lady on one of these sites, right? But it's so much deeper. Families, I talk about human trafficking is the results of a lot of things that have already gone wrong in somebody's life. We talk about generational trauma, families passing on trauma, unresolved trauma becomes vulnerability. And vulnerability is what traffickers seek to exploit. And I think I went off a little bit talking about this, but I don't know if I'm directly answering your question. What was that question again that you asked specifically?
Yeah, no problem. I wanted you to talk a little more about the statistics nationally and locally, because I think people may say that they've heard of it, but I think that they will be blown away to know how prevalent it is in our communities, and it's happening right up under our noses.
Well, the problem is with getting true statistics is that human trafficking is not a police check, is not a police block on a police report. That is one of the major problems. And so it's kind of like the area you go to, like the state attorney here can tell you how many cases that they have. But when we look nationally, we look to an organization called PolarisProject.org. That's the organization that manages the hotline. And from those calls that they get, they're able to arrange some type of statistics. California is number one. Texas is number two. Florida is number three in that list. Always been there for years. And so when we talk statistics, it's very difficult. It's very hard. But you mentioned itself. We're going off statistics that are done by some of these larger organizations like the State Department. When you say 50 million victims, it is probably more, because we just hit a mark of 8 billion people in the world. I'm telling you, it's probably more. And you mentioned something that is statistically right, where experts say human trafficking is the fastest growing criminal enterprise. Well, I think we're beyond that. In my opinion, we are that's the number one crime in the world. Why do I say that? How do you measure this? Do you have a cell phone?
Yes.
Do you buy food?
Yes.
Do you buy clothes?
Yes.
So you have minimum 40 to 60 slaves working for you. What does that mean? If we're buying products from slave labor, we're part of the problem, whether we know it or not, right? So it's about educating, making us, purchase, items that we know that are fair traded, right? That is where, you try to go with education. But we can't get around the cell phone and electronics. There's a lot of things going online right now that is educating us about the cobalt mines in Africa, right? That is in every one of our electronics. If you want, you can have your followers fact check me on this. Google the dark side of chocolate. So if you eat chocolate and it's not fair traded chocolate, maybe that chocolate is coming from, or the beginning processes of that chocolate is starting on the west coast of Africa with a sold child picking a cocoa bean. Do we know these things? No,
Right.
And I don't know if a lot of your followers know this, but last month was Human Trafficking Awareness Month. People don't know that. Why? In my opinion, because like right now it's Black History Month. Every company is promoting that. Next month is going to be Latin Heritage Month. Every company is going to promote that. And after that, they're going to promote cancer awareness. Why weren't they promoting, human trafficking? Because some of these companies, from the moment products are being made to people buying them, have that issue. For what? So we can get cheap products? So what? So they can make more money? That's where we are. Nobody cares unless it's their family, right? Nobody cares. Nobody's making that connection. So this is what Quest for Freedom is about, helping people really understand this and change the culture.
And you brought up some very introspective things for us to take into account in reference to the role that we play. I want you to stay there for a moment, because when we really see the amount of dollars that is a part of human trafficking, and why it is that some companies may not touch it because they're a part of it. Talk a little bit about how people can be aware of the companies that they are supporting with their dollars, and how we can be aware to make sure that we are looking more at the fair trade establishments.
So one of the things that I used to do, I've given hundreds of presentations, and look, we never know it all. We're continuing to grow in this space. I am, at least. And one of the things I used to say at the end of all my presentations, now that you know, what are you going to do about it? Now I'm giving you something to do. Now, fair trade is, you can Google fair trade, and it's not going to give you, like, for instance, there's an organization called Fair Trade America that really works in the agriculture part. So I tell people, if you drink coffee, if you eat chocolate, go to fair trade, put your product, or just go to fair trade, see what chocolate products are fair traded and buy them. There's other ways you can go and just put whatever you're buying and see if it's not part of that chain of human trafficking. Because fair trade only deals with, like I said, some of it only deals with the agriculture part, but there's other avenues you can go to see, like what shoes, what is Nike doing right now, so just fair trade your chocolate, fair trade your coffee. And what I'm hoping is that your followers will spread the word to their family, their friends, and we keep it going. By a year or two from now, when we see fair trade products high and other products low, you have actually made a difference in the world. You've done something where you can tangibly see from a decision that you made that you have power. We all have power to make a difference. Right. We just gotta believe that in ourselves. So that's kind of like where we're going with this. And that's some areas where they can go. Make sure that we're educating ourselves on the products that we're buying. Right now, I don't know how we're getting around the cell phone, but if we get enough people educated in this space to address our elected leaders, to go to the next level and address this issue. We're the best country in the world, they say every day. We're the richest. Can't we come up with another way of making a cell phone without exploiting people? Right? I'm hoping we can.
You know what? It is the responsibility of us to do so. Like you said, once you have the knowledge, once you have been given the information, we can no longer unhear what we heard. And so now it is incumbent upon us to now make the actionable steps to make that change. I want to go here for a moment.
Can I add something to that? Because a lot of people think about human trafficking in the sex trade. And I was talking about labor trafficking, which is 60 to 70% of all trafficking. The sex trade is very interesting, and it's very in our face, and because that's what they show on the news. They don't show a lot of labor trafficking situations. So let me make this in a sex trade area. Now I don't hide from who Vic Williams was pre-human trafficking Vic. There is a pre-human trafficking Vic Williams, and I've learned this through my work, and it changed me as a human being. So this is why I speak so passionately. And I say, man, if most men knew what I know, we can cut half of this issue in half, right? So when we talk in sex trade, and stripping is a legal business. But I never heard anybody say, hey, my daughter's stripping tonight. Let's go, support her. Or my mom is stripping tonight. Now, our organization, don't live in a judgment world. I don't tell people, as long as people making these decisions, right or wrong, if they're making them themselves, that's your business. I don't live in that world of judgment or telling people what to do. I live in a world where people don't have those choices. But because of the way the world is working and the way it looks, because they're not chained to a bed or tied up where you can obviously see a victim, when they're running around free, everybody thinks that they're making this decision on their own. But we understand the invisible chains that are happening in our head. Because if I got your mind, I got your body. And people don't understand that. That's why in human trafficking, I don't allow my organization to show. Every now and then you might see a hand. I don't want them showing people bound to a bed or tied up or gagged, because that, feeds the culture. Oh, that's what a victim looks like. But victims don't look like that. You see them every day in your community and you don't even know it, because we're not looking for them. And they're just like this, free. They're not tied up. So that's kind of like the mentality of when you're talking about change mentality or understand. Yeah, nobody ever says that my mom's stripping tonight, let's go to the strip club, and support her.
And here's the thing, because I actually was about to go into that conversation. We are, for whatever reason, um, being told more about sex trafficking than we are about human trafficking. Why do you think that is so? Because I think that there is a story really in that.
In
In
the
that,
late, yeah.
yeah. Talk a little bit about why you feel that sex trafficking is getting more of the forefront as far as knowledge base and people being aware of it than human trafficking as a whole.
Because we glorify it. We glorify it. Like when I had that first training in human trafficking, I wasn't thinking about prostitution and pimping. That's been a part of our culture my whole life, right? And I'm 58 years old. We glorify it on TV. One on my PowerPoint, I have a little piece of, everybody knows Tom Hanks, but I can do another movie called The Bachelor Party, or with Taye Diggs. I may be saying the Best Man, where he finds out he's at their bachelor party. Remember, he's sitting on the toilet reading the book that he's trying not for him to read. But they got a bachelor party with strippers, and the pimp is there. We glorify this on TV.
Come on.
And I'll give you this again. There is a pre-human trafficking Vic, like part of and I'm giving it away just in case somebody have me come do a presentation for them. There's a part of my presentation where I ask the audience, and I've educated people from schools to high-level governments. And I always ask, especially in an American context, how many people have dressed up as a pimp or a prostitute for Halloween or attended a pimps and hoe party? You get little alligator arms, but that next slide is me in a pimp outfit. Not glorifying this ignorance because it's been cool to do. We make jokes of it because we don't have people in that space that are victimized. We don't see the pain. We don't see the hurt. We don't see the devastation of somebody's life. And we glorified it. So that's number one. And again, I go back to the reason why we focus over there and not on the labor trafficking, because a lot of our industry that we buy things from are part of the problem.
I want to go here because I'm thinking about quite a few things that are transpiring. I know that they talk about statistics as it relates to sex trafficking, that anytime you have big events such as the Super Bowl or the national championships and things of that nature, that those numbers drastically increase. Talk a little bit because as I said, when I made the comment that things are happening up under our nose, like the fact that these statistics are continuing to increase with events like that speaks to how much more these types of tragedies are being unchecked, and they're getting stronger and they're getting bolder. Talk a little bit about the level of awareness that has to take place with us as Americans as it relates to what's taking place here.
Well, first let me say that over time, there really hasn't been, and I don't know, it's some say it does and some say it doesn't. They're like, there's really no statistics to show that the rise of prostitution goes up, but we assume it does because when the Super Bowl is in Miami, we see more people coming to Miami, right? So we're assuming that it goes up. So one of the things that the NFL has done is partner with local communities. Now, every Super Bowl, they're partnering with communities to address and educate us on human trafficking. When I did my presentation for the NBA, I have a goal. If I do it or somebody else, I want the NBA to accept human trafficking as one of their NBA Cares program, right? I want, and when I say I want, I'm hoping, because I just hope that the NFL, imagine one commercial, 30-second commercial. I know it's $7-9 million. Who's willing to put up that to just educate the world? Imagine the amount of people we would reach on this one event that's supposed to be one of the top events marketed in the world. A 15-second, 30-second video educating people to be aware of human trafficking. Look more into it. Educate yourself. Protect your family. Imagine where that goes, right? What I've heard is that Daytona Bike Week is the #1 event that draws that crowd, right? So we assume, but like I say, there's some statistics that show that there is no numbers going up. But I tell you what, I noticed that there's a change, because for a long time, I don't care what Super Bowl, there was always a player getting arrested for prostitution. You're right. I don't know if you remember that, if you were following the games. But in the last couple of years, I haven't really been hearing any NFL ex or current players being caught up in that. Not to say that it's not happening. We just don't hear about it. But before that, I won't do it, but you can name off a couple of names. Oh, so-and-so got arrested for prostitution at the Super Bowl, right? So there's some changes coming. There's some awareness coming, but it's just, in my opinion, because this is a space I work in, I'll take any progress better than none. But it's just like we can move a lot further the more that we spread this word and really educate ourselves. My goal is to change culture. And how do you change culture, in my opinion? You have to educate people to the level that they understand this, that they feel it. And then you got to have policies and laws in place. An example, as a federal agent, if I had a misdemeanor domestic violence situation, when there was a time that it was okay to do these things, but we educated ourselves and said it's not okay, then they add policies and laws that if I had a misdemeanor domestic violence, I don't get to carry it. That means I lose my job. If I got a DUI, I can tell you stories like we used to remember. There was a time we used to give keys to drunk people, and we started educating, and then we started having policies and laws to change things. Mm-hmm. The third thing that really bring it all to is us. When we're faced with these decisions, what decisions do we make based on the education that we have and the policies and laws that are out there? Because not everybody is buying this. So we got to have policies and laws, but it always comes down to us as individuals. When we face with these decisions in that moment, what decision are we going to make?
So as we begin to wrap up, because I think that you definitely covered a number of areas for food for thought. I think that people are becoming a lot more skillful in being able to continue because they understand the level of money that's connected with this. But if we became more vigilant, if we became more aware, if we became more cognizant of the role that we can play, as we begin to wrap up, I want you to share with individuals who this is their first time actually even hearing the magnitude of human trafficking and what is transpiring. Talk to our beautiful viewing audience in reference to how they can actually become involved and become more aware as we close out.
Okay, so first of all, let me define human trafficking, right? Let's do the definition. So the definition of human trafficking, there are really three most important components of that: force, fraud, and coercion. Force, I beat you, make you do what I want you to do. Coercion is the threat of hurting you or somebody in your family, not paying you, not feeding you, not giving you drugs, whatever it is, to get you to do what I want, and then fraud. Come to Miami, be a model, but usually by coercion and force, they traffic you. Those three elements, you got to have one of those elements to even have human trafficking, so to understand what it is. But the difference is those elements only apply to adults. So if you're under the age of 18 and you're being sexually exploited, commercially sexually exploited, you are a victim. Since the Trafficking Protection Act of 2000, this is the first time we had human trafficking laws on the books. After that law was passed, there were no such thing as child prostitution. It took the state of Florida 16 years to finally pass a law that says no more arresting. It took Georgia 19 years. You know, we had the safe harbor thing that came along 12 years after that. This is how hard it is to change culture, right? So I tell people, educate, know the difference, know what it is, educate yourself. And if you think you see it, I have a hotline number, the national hotline that goes to Polaris. They monitor it, and it's 888-3737-888 is the national hotline. If you're local in Miami, the state attorney, Catherine Rundle, who has an amazing program and got to be one of the best at this because she has her attorneys only focusing on human trafficking. When you get to focus just on human trafficking, the learning curve comes a little shorter. But they have a hotline for local Miami is 305-FIX-STOP. That's FIXSTOP, but that number is 305-349-7867. So I tell the audience, continue to educate yourself. Let this be an awareness and a warning for you to dig deeper to protect yourself and your family and your community from this horrific crime.
Thank you so very much for sharing. And I tell you, you know, it gives us a lot of food for thought. We have to make sure that we are being a part of the solution.
Fix, F-I-X, stop.
Oh, okay.
And that's the local hotline. But if you want to do the national one, it's 888-3737-888.
Okay. So we'll put that one up.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. And then the other one was
888-3737-888, and that's the national hotline.
888-3737.
888. I give it that way because it makes it sound easier, but it's 888-3737-888. So I just go 3737-888.
National. Okay, awesome. And so you all, as I said, once you get the information, you can't unhear it. We heard it, and now we have to do something about it, be a part.
And I also tell them to go to Quest to Freedom. That's Quest, the number 2 freedom.org. to follow up with us. They can learn some stuff there. They can reach out to us. And, we're all about educating, and we do it for free. If it's local, it's definitely free. We don't want anybody to not get this information because they can't afford it. We're going to be working on donations and grants. That's how important this is to us. So, yep, there you go. questtofreedom.org. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Williams. I want to just really thank you for your service. Thank you for having enough compassion for people that you felt compelled to come out of retirement and be a part of really bringing awareness to this. And so you all, I definitely want you all to go to his website, questtofreedom.org, see how you can get involved, connect with him for a presentation, to come out, to give more information. Typically, how long is your presentations when you do it?
It all depends. It can be, I at least like to go 30 minutes, okay. I like to minimum 30 minutes. I mean, that's going fast. Just, it all depends on the situation, but an hour, 2 hours, whatever. I try to adjust to whatever the needs are and who's the audience. And before I go, can I thank you? Because, meeting you for the first time, and you sent me some stuff that you've been doing, and listening to the quality of people that you bring on to educate our community in all kind of areas. We need more people like you. And I want to thank you for what you're doing, because this doesn't get heard without people like you caring enough to get this information out to the community. So thank you for what you do.
Praise God. Thank you. Thank you. humbly take on this task. I feel like, a lot of times we're inundated with all of what's transpiring in the world, but there are really people who are doing a yeoman's job in bringing awareness and changing the culture as it relates to some of the horrific things that are happening. But guess what? There are people like yourself, Mr. Williams, who have taken on this task to make sure that people know we see you and your life is worth living. And so thank you so much again for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. And the last thing I'll say, everybody has the power to make a difference. I don't care where you've been, what you're doing. You have the power to make a difference. So, be that light for your community.
And so that is the charge that we give to our beautiful ABL viewers. And without further ado, I am your host, JQ Lee. Thank you so much for tuning in.
I'm living a beautiful life. I'm making a beautiful